Hi, Sarah West here with the Chara Project. Welcome back to our second week in our study of the Prodigal Son. If you joined us last week, we focused in on the younger brother, the one whom this parable is named after, the prodigal himself. And this week, we get to look at the older brother. The older brother often receives a lot less attention than the younger brother, but scholars will often contend that the older brother is the true climax of the story and the essence and the reason Jesus told this parable in the first place. But in order to see that, we have to go back to the beginning of Luke chapter 15 and find out who Jesus was talking to and what was going on. So we uncovered last week that Jesus was talking to the sinners and the tax collectors. And in verse 2, we find out that the Pharisees and the scribes were also there, and they were complaining that Jesus was eating with sinners and tax collectors. And so it was in response to these complaints that Jesus began to tell three parables in a row. Now, all three parables tell one unified story of God's heart for the lost and his joy over repentant sinners. In each of the three parables, there's a lost item that is found, and it ends with a joyous celebration. So up to this point in the prodigal son, we had the lost son return home to the joy of the Father. There's a joyous celebration at the end. So imagine being Jesus's listeners and thinking, oh, the parable must be over, the story's over. But Jesus continues, and for good reason. In verse 25, in walks the older brother. And where he comes in from is significant. See, the older brother walks in from the field. He had been out working hard in the field all day. And we need to compare this to and remember with the younger brother, how he chose to spend his time, right? He wasted his father's inheritance on reckless living. So in walks this brother. He hears singing, and there's dancing, and there's this big celebration going on. And when he finds out that his reckless, good-for-nothing younger brother has returned and his father was throwing a village-wide celebration that included the fattened calf, this brother is ticked. He is angry. And I want to read just two verses for you here, beginning in verse 29, that illustrate why he was so angry, because that's the thing that really stands out to me, is why won't the older brother join the father in the celebration? The reason is really quite shocking. So in verse 29 it says, "But he replied to his father, 'Look, I have been slaving many years for you, and I have never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him.'" Okay, so the older brother, he's going, hey, I stayed home and I've been slaving for you. I've never disobeyed you, and you've never even given me a goat, let alone the fattened calf. So that in this response, there's a couple things that are revealed, but one of them is that the older son, in his goodness, he was being good and obeying in order to get the father's stuff, rather than trying just for a relationship with the father himself. And I don't know about you, but that kind of gets at me and makes me ask myself, boy, how often do I do the same thing? How often am I, is my motive for being good or for being obedient and doing the right thing? Is it to get stuff, or is it just to get a relationship with the Father? And so Jesus is telling this parable because he wants those Pharisees and scribes to be able to identify and see themselves in the older brother and see their lack of compassion for their lost, and to see their very real need to repent, and to see that they too are cut off from a loving, intimate relationship with the Father. You see, this parable ends up being a story of two lost sons, not just one, and a story of two sons who had distanced themselves and cut themselves off from a loving relationship with the Father. And when I began to see this and really ask why won't this older brother join the celebration, man, it really convicted me, and it changed my life, to be honest. I can relate to the older brother, and I hope you'll join us this week and really unpack what we can learn through this story of the older brother. All right, thanks for joining us.